The aim of this video is to help you to transition from your interim learning report through to your final learning report, to be able to get it done and to be able to do it well. I'm really going to be focusing on those areas which weren't done as well, and just also making sure that you understand the change in focus in section 1 of this report from the interim learning report. But we're going to start with section 2 first, because I think that's where the most assistance can be provided to you. You'll have all got your feedback from your interim learning report, and while that will be different obviously across the class, there were some commonalities in the way that people, even where people did fairly well, I was still asking them to give me more depth in their reflection, and so hopefully this will help. And for those of you who really weren't able to really get into the process as well as you could have, hopefully this will get you back on track and enable you to move forward. So if you go to the final learning report area in assessments on Blackboard, you'll see that you've got the task instructions. Make sure you're following the task instructions faithfully as they've been written. They outline the process, and as always, I'm assessing the process. There's a couple of examples of my reflection there. I think the Cole Reflects Again one is most probably the easiest one for you to follow through on, and that sort of shows you what you would expect the reflection to look like. So here's an example. This is for question number 3, supporting question number 3, and you can sort of see how I'm making a statement and then I've got the why. So I'm asking myself why. My values have been more confirmed than challenged. Why is that the case? Being an entrepreneurial educator and an edupreneur, if you like, requires me to separate pure business connotations of entrepreneurship and reduce it to a human condition rather than a business process. Why? Otherwise, I could not be myself in the educator role I perform. Why? To view entrepreneurship only as a business process eliminates its presence in the lives of the majority, a bad outcome for society. Why is that the case? Everyone gains from creating new values in their own lives, from being able to adjust their inner world to their outer world. So this one paragraph doesn't make perfect sense, because obviously there's a paragraph that came before it, and I'm continuing on that logic. And the primary question here, you'd have to go back and look at that as well. However, all I really wanted to show you here is that's sort of what your paragraph should look like. Maybe there's 5 whys in it, maybe there's 6 whys in it, but you've got a sentence, it's followed by a why, which is followed by a sentence, which is followed by a why, which is followed by a sentence, which is followed by a why, which is followed by a sentence. And that's all you need to do, right? But it's the depth that you need to achieve across this. I'm not saying what I've written there is perfect. I think I could most probably do better if I went back and I really tried, but I was responding to a question that was given to me, and I wanted to get that reflection done in pretty quick time to help folks. So you'll have heard me if many of you will have heard me talking again about this notion of horizontal or diagonal versus vertical use of the why. And it's really important that you understand when I give you back that feedback and I say you were more horizontal than you were vertical or more diagonal, that you understand what I'm saying there, and that is that we can move from an opinion to our feelings. So if I had said, for argument's sake, for me, honesty is important, then the why comes in. Now at that moment, once the why is there, I could be heading off in a horizontal direction, which would be because everyone deserves to be treated nicely. So that's just an opinion I hold. It could be a more diagonal response, which is because it makes me feel better when I treat others honestly. So that's a bit of an opinion and a bit of a feeling. Or it could be quite vertical, because I was raised to appreciate the importance of being honest. Now, of course, there's going to be another why on the end of that, right? And it's going to continue on and on and on. And so if we can keep stacking up the vertical responses, our reflection is going to go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, as opposed to just simply going across the top of the surface. So in terms of your challenge for the final learning statement, this is the question you've got. This is your primary question. What have you learned about yourself and or your ability to be entrepreneurial during the semester. So you can take it in one of two different ways. You can just talk to me about yourself as a learner, and I'm happy with that. Or you can talk to me about your ability to be entrepreneurial, and you can combine the two things. All right? I don't mind which one of those you want to take on board. Having taken that primary question, then you're going to have your 7 supporting questions. Now you've got 6 supporting questions which relate to that process of reflection, and 1, question 7, which relates specifically to your metacognition. So that's your reflection on the reflection, okay? So you don't need to pay specific attention to the primary question at that level. But the primary question should be a shadow across supporting questions 1 through to 6. It should set the context for the nature of how you're talking. You don't have to talk to it directly constantly, but it should be connected to the nature of your answers. So if we were going to start, we've got our first question, and obviously our first question is about the extent to which you've noticed something new. Now, quite often people will write down something new that isn't actually new. It's just, they're just finding a starting point. That really weakens what you're doing. You want to have stepped back, just relax and think to yourself, okay, so if I'm thinking about myself as a learner across this semester, or if I'm thinking about myself as being entrepreneurial, what have I recognized about myself that is new to me? It might not be new to somebody else, but it's new to you. And that's the starting point. So that'd be sentence number 1. During this semester, I have recognized, I have noticed, I have realized X, Y, and Z. All right? And it's something that's connected to the first supporting question, which is what's new, and in relation to the context of the supporting question. So that's where you would start. All right? So tell me, succinctly, 1 sentence, what is it that you've recognized that's new? Then you would ask yourself, well, why is that the case? Why am I only recognizing that now? Why is that the issue at hand? So then your second question would be exploring sentence 1. Why do you think and feel what you said? So now, rather than extending it, rather than continuing what you've just said, I want you to explicitly explore what you've just said, and this will give you the vertical movement downways, because now you're asking yourself, why is that the case? Why is that important to me? Why do I feel that way? Okay? And again, after you've written the next sentence, sentence 2, then you're going to ask yourself, well, why is that the case? Why have I come to that viewpoint? And that'll allow you to write sentence 3. And sentence 3 is just an opportunity for you to explore sentence, the sentence above. Okay? Again, why do you feel or think what you just said? All right? And then you can complete that process all the way down. Explore sentence 3, explore sentence 4, until you finally get down to, and I'm assuming you've used why 5 times. I think most people need to use it 5 times, but you might be really, really good at using this process, and you might be able to get away with using it 3 times. I'd say out of 300 students, there's only 2 of you in the class that are that good at using why. So I wouldn't risk it, and I would say close to 50% of you only used it about 3 times, right? And I would say 30% of you didn't use it at all, right? Which left me with the challenge of having to try and guess whether you're using it, but for whatever reason, you just didn't put it in, all right? So it has to be in, whether it's red or black, whether it's the word why or the letter Y, it has to be there because it shows me when you stopped to reflect on what you've just said. And what I would expect to see is some kind of exploration is going to follow of what you just said, okay? Now, it may well be that you end up writing 2 sentences between a why. That's okay, but certainly not 3 and certainly not 4, all right? Because you want to try and keep things snappy. You want to try and keep things concise. The more sentences you have between your whys, the harder it is to get to 5 whys, right? Because you're going to run out of words. So that's the process, okay? Really important that you follow that process. Some people have actually, if you put all these red Y's onto the other side of the page, some people have actually just written it like that. They've just put a sentence and then they've almost like brought back to the margin on the left-hand side, put their Y in and followed it with the next sentence and repeated that down. I actually quite like that. I'm not going to suggest everyone should do it, but I think that's okay. And it shows me very clearly where that exploration is, okay? So there's the challenge for you in doing that. If at this stage you are unsure still of this process, there'll be some Zoom sessions that'll occur, but if you're still unsure, come and have a chat, all right? And let's get that process right, because believe it or not, I actually mark the first approach to doing this reflection process in a very developmental way. I'm very supportive with my marking in the first time round. The second time round, I'm expecting you now to understand the nature of that process, and I'm expecting you to do it better, all right? So if you offer me up exactly the same thing as you did the first time round, don't be surprised if you mark slightly less, right? It's not that I'm looking to take marks off anyone, but believe it or not, I've actually given people the benefit of the doubt and encouraged them. So many of you might have ended up with, 65% for that part of it. You got 2 for most of the sections. But in reality, maybe it was 1.5 that you really should have got. But I'm trying to encourage you to give in to this process, to trust the process, okay? So let's go back to section 1. Section 1's a little bit different to section 1 in the previous, the interim learning report, in that now I want you to be really thinking about the feedback you got in your presentation. Now, a lot of people have said, what was the feedback we got? You can go back and watch the video, obviously, of the lecture recording and get to the end of the presentations, which would be about an hour in. And the general feedback I gave to everyone is, there's no money on the table. Let's make the assumption your group doesn't have access to the resources you want. You don't have money that you can just assume you can throw at something. So now the challenge is, what energy can you find? What energy can you find to actually find a way to move your idea forward, right? It's where most entrepreneurs start. You could say 80% of entrepreneurs basically start with nothing, and they have to grow things fairly slowly, and they have to beg, steal, and borrow. And one of the things that they do is they find ways to tap into things they can't own or control, energy, that they can use to their advantage, okay? So that's the first thing. I want you guys to think about that challenge. That's the feedback from your presentation. Okay, let's start again. There's no money. And now I want you to really start thinking about energy. So then the second thing is I want you to think about, well, how did that challenge the assumptions that you and your group had? Maybe you just assumed that that's not that big a deal. In fact, a lot of you said, we've got a pretty good resource profile. And that really wasn't a big deal. I think most of you would have written more about social capital and human capital than you did financial capital. And remember, financial capital is not just purely money. It's your ability to access to whatever the resources are you need to move things forward. So in that sense, while I'm saying there's no money, I'm also saying your access to resources shouldn't be assumed, all right? So tell me about the challenge that makes to your assumptions. Then I want you to be able to sit back and identify the types of energy that you think you could use and how could they support sustainable coactions. So by sustainable, we mean symbiotic or commensalistic. They're the 2 that you were tested on in your pre-test. So 1, we both benefit from the nature of the interaction, or 2, I benefit and you're unharmed. Therefore, it's sustainable because it's doing you no harm, all right? So to what extent can you find some interactions in the marketplace that actually could be really beneficial to you? As you move through that process, I want you to be able to then think about, now, how are you going to make the case why your CPS or COS statement is now more compelling, all right? So I wasn't requiring you to do that the second time around. So if you just repeat your CPS statement, it's most probably you're not going to travel very well in terms of getting marks. Now I want you to be a real sell job, okay? I want you to tell me why this CPS statement should now sing out to me and say, you know what? This problem for these people can be solved this way because we can get a benefit from developing this coaction over here by using this energy. That's the type of theme that I'm looking for. It doesn't have to be perfect. There just needs to be a reasonable amount of logic that would support that. Like always, it's very, very important that you follow the task instructions. So a lot of you didn't follow the task instructions. So you've got one page of instructions to follow. That's all you need to follow, okay? So follow that. Obviously, they link directly to the rubric that's beneath them. So you can see the focus areas of the rubric. So there should be no surprises to you about how the marking will be done. What I want you to do is I definitely want you to integrate the elements. So many of you would say, okay, you're going to talk about resource profiles, and you mentioned human capital, social capital, financial capital, and then that's it. Zip, they didn't make an appearance for the rest of what you had to say. Or you got down to the value creation, right? So a lot of you told me what you thought you could do in terms of creating value, but not many people told me how you think you would be able to capture that value, all right? So clearly, you can't make the case to me that you've got a compelling argument about why your CPS statement's so great now if you haven't told me how you're going to capture that value, all right? And that's going to have a lot to do with the nature of the co-actions that you are putting forward and being able to say that you could create, all right? So follow those task instructions, integrate the elements. You don't have to knock yourself out. You can see in the task instructions which ones I'm most focused on, all right? I love it if you want to chuck in something else into there that might not be necessarily required, but don't let it dominate the nature of the argument that you're making, all right? But do feel free to use as many as you want, but use them in an integrated way. Some of you most probably just had a heading called, value creation. But then you didn't talk at all. You didn't even use the terms value shop, value chain. It's not the headings that are going to excite me. It's your use of the terminologies in the sentences, and I can see how vulnerable you are to those theoretical concepts. You either understand how they work and what they are and how they relate to each other, or you don't. The easiest way to show that to me is to use them together, all right? I only had one or two papers that concern me in terms of people copying each other's work. I've given a couple of people the benefit of the doubt because it's sort of, I'm thinking, I'm not sure. But I will say this. Do not run out of time and get someone's paper. When I sit in front of Turnitin, it compares your paper to everyone else in the class. And if you've got a paragraph that's the same as someone else in the class, even if you changed a couple of words, it's going to tell me, hey Cole, this paper's the same as that one. So be careful who you give your paper to, all right? Be very careful who you give your paper to, because someone may tell you that they're not going to copy it, but if they do, then you're both in trouble, all right? So be very, very careful with the interaction you have with the group people. The papers that most impressed me were the people who actually said, but our group discussed this, and while everyone seemed to agree with that, to be honest with you, I disagreed because of X, Y, and Z, and I thought, well, good on you. Good on you for not just taking on board what everyone says. It's not to say that the group can't reach a consensus, but the more you get into this, the more you'll see that there's many different ways to skin that cat. Also keep in mind, what Turnitin is also going to do is that if you try to pass off your last assignment for essentially a revised one, you should not be working from the previous assignment and just trying to update things. It's a new assignment. You've only got to write 1,000 words for section 1. Start from the beginning. Give me something that's original. If you give me something that's got the same paragraph in it, Turnitin's going to say, hey, this is similar to it. And then when I click on to see what it's similar to, I'll see it was similar to yours. No, you didn't do the work, all right? Overall, I thought the assignments were done pretty well. There was some really good work in there. And obviously there's a mixture, right? The people who were sort of not following the process as much as they could have, through to the ones who knocked the process out of the park. That's my final advice to you. Follow the process, trust the process, look at the rubric of how I'm going to be assessing this, and you can basically reverse engineer this. You already know what it is I'm looking for something to be a 7 or a 6 or whatever. So plan to make sure that you hit all of those along the way, okay? As always, any problems, any questions, just give me a hoy.